Hello, friends. Welcome to our HTML5 course from scratch. So in this first lesson, we're going to just set it up just like a movie trailer. Now, the most important feature of this course is that we're going to learn all the topics that we're going to see by applying them in more than one place. So in other words, we're going to see them over and over again, and that way we learn by repetition. So all of the information that I have ever learned pretty much has been applied because I repeat it and repeat it. But I don't want to make it boring. So, of course, it's a big responsibility here. Want you to practice what you have learned and all of the examples that we're going to do with a variety of variations. So let me just show you quickly what we're going to talk about in our course. First up, we're going to start with the most basic subject, which is HTML tags. And here we're just going to examine the tags that we'll use frequently, from the header tag to the input tag. We're going to download our Atom application to see all of these tags in use. Now, as you may understand, we're going to do pretty much all of our applications with Atom. Next up, we're going to learn how to add and edit pictures, and that's going to help us to add some color or pop to our web pages. Of course, we can do this with the help of a few other things, and here are these particular attributes. So it's attributes that will allow us to make adjustments in HTML. Of course, while browsing the internet, we're going to see lots of lists created for, various purposes on many sites. So sometimes it's a list of food. Sometimes there may be, the top 100 things to do in your life. So here we're going to learn how to make such a list, whether you want it to be ordered or unordered. Let's call it a bucket list for now. So in HTML, we will learn the HTML information on its most basic level together. And we're going to start with the list subject. Now, before starting a table and forming the topics for the intermediate side of this, just want to briefly run you through the block level and inline elements in HTML. So here we're just going to briefly talk about the div and the span tags, and that's going to give you the idea of how to style in CSS. Now, many things that are typically retained in web pages are done with the help of tables, right? Databases. So these tables are sometimes visible, sometimes they're not necessarily visible due to lack of borders. But anyway, here we're going to learn everything right from the beginning, how to set it up and how do you edit rows, adding columns. So I guess most of us are, typically scroll through Facebook, Instagram. We email every day, right? Have you ever wondered how those pages are before you enter or you register, how they're made? So I'm going to take you through that. And here we're also going to learn how to design and what the logic is behind these pages. Now, naturally, you won't be able to develop an expert knowledge in how to do this, but don't worry about it, because in our next subject and in our next courses, you will be able to be an HTML expert. But this is, as I said before, this is the beginning, right? So after completing this course, you're going to be able to build a basic HTML page structure from start to finish. Most importantly, you will gain HTML logic, and that way you'll be able to develop pages on your own a whole lot more easily. So if you want to be fully competent in the art of HTML, you can also join our CSS and JavaScript courses. And if you're scratching your head going, what? Well, just continue with this course for now. And when you want to know more, you'll know where to go. Okay, so yeah, that's enough of this sort of trailer for now. Let's start the movie. Hello, my friends. In this lesson, I want to talk to you about the structure and how it all came to be of web pages, which are pretty much that user area of HTML. And I promise I'll keep it interesting. However, first I do want to remind you, or let you know if you never have learned it before, that the word internet, it's derived from interconnected networks. Okay, so the internet is referred to as an electronic communication network that enables the connection of computer networks, transferring a control protocol. And anyway, that's called TCP/IP. And that is, the internet is defined as a set of connected networks. I think that's pretty much the easiest way to remember it. Briefly, the internet allows computers around the world to communicate with each other via cables. And the information on these computers is stored in what we will call a server, which is open 24/7. Now, resources that allow us to access this data are also called web browsers. And we all tend to know Chrome and Firefox, Safari, etc. The data that comes into us when we search inside of our browser, it's typically going to consist of 3 different types of page structures. So this includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's the most widely used markup language, and it's used to display web pages on the internet. In other words, web pages are composed of HTML, which is used to display text, images, or other resources through your chosen web browser. So HTML is the basic building block, if you will, of the web, and it actually isn't technically a programming language. But it is responsible for the structure of the website. So first we will establish our structure. So that's it, right? No. I mean, there's a whole lot more to it than that, because we've got to create visually rich content which is used on web pages. So here is also the CSS factor coming into our lives. Now, CSS is short for Cascade Style Sheet. Okay, so it's responsible for shaping of the website. Okay, so is that all you need to know? Negative. The third component of what we're going to be learning here is JavaScript, which is necessary to determine how each different part of the web page functions. So what I'm actually setting up for you here is, how are you going to basically learn what's essential and what is unnecessary? So I've decided that it's kind of more useful to examine the issues separately. So in this course, what we're going to do is start with HTML, and that's the basis of web development. And then, if you want to go up to the next floor, so to speak, in your progression, you will be able to learn the other topics once you've mastered this. All right, so let's have a little chat then about the text editor. We're going to prepare our applications with this text editor while we learn HTML. Of course, there are many options for text editors. And before we get to my favorite, I want to let you know what else is out there, right? There is Atom, as I mentioned before. There's Brackets, VS Code, Notepad. But I think the most useful and visually beneficial to us all, especially when you're starting out, is Atom. So, in this course, we're going to make all of our applications in Atom. So in order to use the Atom editor, we're going to download it to our computer. Of course, we'll go to Google or whatever your favorite search engine is to download Atom. And all we do is type in Atom and go to the first page from the results that come up. And then on the page here, we'll click Download. And as you can see, Atom is downloading. And then when the download finishes, we'll just open up atom.exe. Now, we get a blank screen. And if you get a welcome screen or black screen, it doesn't matter. Let's just get to work. So close all of these screens And what I want to tell you is just go through some of the initial properties for Atom that are going to be most useful. So we're going to be learning by practice or hands-on, as I told you before. So I don't want to necessarily just overload you with a lot of theory or practical or, logical explanations. I just want to show you the features as we will use them. So I want to show you the properties of Atom as they become available. You can, of course, poke around if you want to, but then you will be able to use the different tools in the applications that we're going to make, and that way you will learn it as best as you possibly can. All right, so what did we do today? We answered the question of what is HTML. Briefly, we talked about some of the other components of front-end development. Then we prepared the necessary environment for HTML by downloading Atom, and that we will be able to use throughout our course. So in the next lesson, that's when we're going to talk about the basic tag usage in HTML. All right, I hope you're all set up, and I will see you in the next lesson. Hello, my friends. So in this section, we're going to talk about what the common HTML tags are. Tags and attributes are the basis of HTML. Tags are used to mark up the start of an HTML element. And as you can see here, tags are open first, content is written, and then usually closed with angle brackets. So first, let's have a look at what these tags are and that we're going to be able to practice with. Now, of course, there are going to be many or even hundreds of HTML tags, but don't concern yourself with that. We're going to use some of these tags regularly. So in this lesson, we're going to go over some of the most common tags used to create an HTML document that we see on probably in everyday life. So let's have a look at how we use these tags in applications. In our previous lesson, you remember we mentioned that we would prepare our applications with Atom, and we downloaded Atom. So now we can start up Atom and continue our topic through Atom. Now, a regular start is important to avoid confusion for the future. So before we start using Atom, I want to first create a project folder. And to do this, just right-click where we want to and select the new folder. For example, let's name HTML projects, and then let's go back to Atom, and now we can add project folder. Now let's create a new HTML file for our first project. And again, we can click File and New File. We'll use the HTML extension to make the file that we create here an HTML file. Okay? So yes, our first HTML file is ready. Now we've got to fill in our file. So first, we will need to add the default HTML code. Now, you're going to know what I mean about using Atom here. So write HTML on the screen and press the Tab key. Ta-da! Atom even created the HTML structure for us. And as you can see, the program saves time by completing our code thanks to this prediction feature. Now first, an HTML page starts with the doc type declaration. Now this is not an HTML tag. It is an instruction to the web browser about what version of HTML the page is written in. Then comes the HTML tag with language and directory attributes. The HTML lang attribute is used to determine the language of the text content. So this helps search engines return specific results. The dir attribute determines the writing direction of the content that we write. For example, English is written from left to right, while, let's say, Arabic is written from right to left. So we can say the HTML tag is a basic tag and compiles other tags that we use. So usually we will open and close the tags first, and then they fill up. So our second basic tag is the head tag. So this is a section where content and definitions related to the site are prepared. The codes contained in this field will not appear in an HTML document. This tag functions together with other child tags, such as title, meta, script, etc. So it can be said that it's a helper tag. It doesn't really function alone. Okay, so now we come to the meta tag that you see here. So this tag contains information about the application, and again, it's not visible in the browser. So right here, you can see that it gives information about char set, page writer, last date modified, etc. Now the title tag, which is under the head tag, is used for revealing the title of the HTML document and is usually displayed in the browser's title bar at the top. It's also displayed in browser bookmarks and search results. So let's go ahead and add our title, which will appear in the browser. We'll just add it to the title content, and let's see what happens when we save our application. All right, so our title now appears in the browser. Terrific. So now it's time to fill in the body tag. So the body tag is the label that contains everything inside of our web page, and we can edit the content of our page by using other tags. And we can say, well, everything else in the head or in the body tag. So the head and body tags are similar, but they aren't inside of each other. So let's just write up some text, which we can use inside the body tag. So first, we'll talk about headers used in an HTML document. There are pretty much 6 different headings from H1 to H6. And H1 is the most important, and H6 would be the least important. That is, the number decreases as the heading grows. So let's write the heads in order and see what difference they're going to be together, and we can do some copying and pasting to make things easier. So let's save and run our application. And look at that. See, so the number decreases as the heading grows, just like I told ya. Here, so let me show you something. We can increase the figure up to 6. So if we use H7 or H8, there will be no change. Now, the other tag is the P tag, which is a paragraph tag, and the tag will format text into a paragraph. Now, the strong tag is used to indicate the importance of text between them, and the bold expression. The B tag thickens that expression without specifying any significance, and it makes the word between the tag bold. So here we'll use these tags, and we can see that the words in between are indeed bold. Now the M tag is used to highlight text. The I tag defines part of the text in an alternate voice or mood. Now, of course, both display text in italics, and here we can see the difference in the words between these tags are italic. Now, if we want to use underlined text, we can use the U tag. And so as we make these changes, we can save our application, and let's see what it looks like. Excellent. So there you go. You've learned the basic tags and their functions and how they're used in an HTML document. And we prepared our first application in Atom. Now, if you want to build on that, we'll see you in the next class. Hello, my friends. In our last lesson, we learned the basic HTML tags that we'll use frequently. Now, in this section, we're going to delve in a little deeper, and we're going to start to enrich our site visually. So today we're going to talk about images and attributes. So let's give it a shot. So images, probably the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about the visual media. So let's start with that, and let's see how to add some images first. So the img, or image tag, is used to add an image into HTML documents. The image tag is not a closed tag, so we don't write /image at the end of this tag. There are two required attributes for the image tag. The src attribute, that's used to specify the image to add. So here we'll come across two different situations. So if the image to be added is in the same directory as our HTML file, we only need to write the name of the image file with the extension. Now, in the second case, if the picture to be added is a picture somewhere out on the internet, we're going to need to write the link of this picture here. All right, so consolidating all of that, we also have to write the same again in the application. So we add text that defines the image that we have added with our alt attribute. So, why do we have to add descriptive text to an image? I'll give you a couple of reasons for it. First is to allow search engines to understand what our image is about. The other reason is that if users can't view the image, well, there's information for them. So why wouldn't users be able to see the image? Well, most common reasons for this are, well, slow internet. Some people are actually still using dial-up, and that's okay. Another one is an error in the source attribute, or a user using a screen reader, and many others. But for now, that's good. So let's have a little review about what we've already talked about. The most basic form of the image tag, remember that from the beginning of the lesson. We open the image tag and then typed src and the alt attributes between them. Now, of course, there are many more attributes that we can write, and we're going to see some of those in practice soon, but some of them, in fact, in our CSS course. So let's just cut to the chase and get to having some fun. So for this, let's open up our program, Atom, and now we can create a new HTML file inside the practice folder. Then we first write HTML and press the Tab key to create the basic HTML structure. And for this, we can write practice 2 as our title. All right, so let's get into the body, and we'll start adding our image. So we'll start with just a picture from our computer. For example, let's let our concept be of the world, right? So for this, I happen to have a beautiful picture of the world on my computer. Now I'm going to create a new folder named Pictures in the project folder and put our picture in this folder. Okay, so because of that, our picture is now ready. So it's time to add it into our HTML file. And as you may remember, we add the image tag and then our src and alt attributes between. Now, in the src attribute, we'll write world.jpg and write world as alt attribute. All right, so our HTML file looks ready, doesn't it? And if that's right, then let's save it and run it. Whoa, where's our world? No world. Oh, but look, at least we see this. Okay, so sometimes users can't see the image that we've added. They would see the descriptive text that we wrote into the alt attribute. And that's why we do it. Now, why didn't we see the picture? Well, because the image that we added with our HTML file is not in the same directory. So, in order to correct this error, we'll just need to correctly write the directory where our image is located. So let's now go to the application and say that our image is under pictures, and that's the folder. So let's save it and try it again. And there is our beautiful world. So now let's talk about some of these other common attributes. The first two of these attributes are width and height. And of course, as you may have been able to guess, we can adjust the aspect ratio of our image with these attributes. For example, let's reduce our beautiful world a little and first look at the current dimensions of the world. So to do this, we're going to go to our picture and right-click and click on the features. Going to the Details tab, and yep, sure enough, it's here. Now, the size of this image is 1600 by 900 pixels. The most important thing to consider when playing with the dimensions of the pictures is to stick to the original aspect ratio. For example, if we want to reduce this picture, we can make it 800 by 450 pixels. In other words, the width and the length of the image will reduce at the same rate. So let's do that. And then we write these attributes like src and alt on our other two attributes. And then we save it and we can see the result. And there it is. Our world is getting smaller. It shrunk. But here we have reduced both values by half to ensure that the aspect ratio does not deteriorate. So what if we want to take our picture to a ratio that we can't calculate the aspect ratio so simply in our head? So in this case, we would set the width to the desired value and don't enter any value for the height. Excellent. So now another attribute is the title. Of course, this title is not the title tag that we saw before. This is the title attribute. So in this attribute, when the image is hovered over in the browser, a bubble appears with whatever we want to write. So for example, when you hover over our image, let the world, and we can write other attributes and write the world into it. Save and refresh our page, and there you see that the bubble comes out when we hover our mouse over it. So that's enough for now, don't you think? We've pretty much learned how to add an image to the HTML page and make some basic adjustments. And we started the attributes and looked at some of the attributes that we use to add an image. So goodbye for now, but I do want to see you in the next lesson. So review what you need to, and we'll carry on because we're going to learn how to use the HTML lists. Hello, my friends. Just as promised, in this section, we're going to talk about HTML lists. HTML lists are used to create, lists of information. Now, all lists may contain one or more list elements. There are basically three types of lists in HTML, and specific tags are used to create each type. So an unordered HTML list, an ordered HTML list, and a definition HTML list are the three types. So let's have a closer look at these lists in the application. So let's open up Atom again. And first of all, let's create an HTML file named list for HTML. And we'll continue our topic in this file. Now, of course, we create the HTML structure to specify that we will write with HTML. And I'm sure you remember that you just type HTML and press Tab, and Atom is taking care of the rest. So we'll start with our first list, which is the unordered list type. Now, an unordered list is obviously not ordered by whatever number, letter, or any other ordering system that you can figure. A marker or a bullet is displayed next to each item list. Unordered lists are created using the UL tag, and it's defined as a bullet. So after that, we can just use the li tag to define each item in the list. For example, supposing that we want to sort drinks. We'd like to list drinks that we typically get, coffee, tea, lemonade, Coke. Then here's where we write the drinks that we want to make the list of with the li tag. And that's it. Okay, so such markers or bullets are created automatically if we haven't identified a specific type. Or let's say that we want to make a circle marker. We'll add the type attribute to the ul tag again and give it the circle value. And we'll see these and other visual subjects in detail in our CSS lesson. But right now, I just want to define a list with you under coffee. So let's define a new ul tag under the li tag of coffee. And then I'll add Hello, my friends. So in this lesson, we will prepare a sample menu in order to reinforce the HTML information that we have learned so far. As you can see here, we will prepare a sample coffee menu with you. So if you wish, you can stop here and test what you've learned on your own and then examine what we've been doing. Or you can just follow along with us and we'll prepare a different menu example. You can do one on your own. So let's start right now by writing our example on Atom. So open up the application and add an HTML file named list example to our project. Press tab by typing HTML and get our general HTML tags. First, write the title that we want to appear in the browser into the title tag. And when we look at the sample that we've prepared, we'll see that we've just added a picture that wrote a menu. Now, if you remember, we use the img tag to add a picture, and we add the URL address of the place with the src attribute. So let's now add the products in the menu gradually. So we'll see that 3 different groups are listed sequentially here: beverages, sandwiches, desserts. So then we can write the OL tag, which is our sequential list creation tag. And first we can add the beverages with the li tag. And since we want this to be like a head, I'll write in the h2 tag. Yeah, but here the spelling of the number 1 I don't really like it so much, so I want to move it to the h2 tag and move that into the li tag. When we do it this way, there seems to be a problem in the number 1. So let's try to solve this problem by using the b tag. And yeah, there you go. I think that is a much better appearance. But the point that I want to make here and to have you pay attention to is the use of nested tags. So the first one, the B tag, is finally closed, and then the LIN H2 tag in turn. So if you wish, you can add and finish the elements in the first list in order. So we can add the sandwiches and desserts part in the same way. And sure enough, when we look at what we've done, our first list elements have been added. All right, so now it's time for what we can do with these beverages. So let's add hot beverages, which are slightly smaller than our first heads. And we'll use the H3 tag for that. Now pay attention to the underline, and we can use our U tag. And we can see here that there is an unordered list form, and we can add these elements to our UL tag with a I tag. And yeah, it's on our list, so what do we have to do to have some options here? So what we'll do is we'll need to add a new list. And when we look at the sample that we've prepared, it's an ordered list that starts with the small letter A. So we should declare the type attribute as a small a in the OL tag. And when we add our milk or no milk preference, hot drinks are also ready. So now it's time to add our head to the cold drinks section with the H3 tag. And we're going to have another list. Now, having so many lists can be a bit boring, but I think it's good experience for you to create different types of nested lists. So let's add our cold drinks here, and the drinks section is finished. So now we can start adding the sandwich section. So first, an unordered list part that, catches the eye. We can add and look at the cheese sandwich with the li tag. And the first thing that catches my eye must be dark, but we haven't added that yet. So remember that we used a strong or B tag for that? Right. So what we want to use then is the strong tag. And now it's time to write our, the ingredients of the cheese sandwich, right? So we can add white cheese, tomato, salad, and lettuce. And note that, do you see how this is in italics? Because we wrote it in the I tag, and we can add our other sandwiches in the same way. So here we can just copy and paste. That'll make our job a little easier. And look at that. Most of our menu is ready. So now for me, here's the best part. It's in the desserts. Of course, we're going to do a list again, but don't worry. This is going to be our last list here. So let's add an unordered list, and we'll start adding the different kinds of sweets. And when we look at the cheesecake section, we come across an ordered list with Roman numerals. And we immediately determine the type of the OL tag as I and add our varieties. We immediately determine the type of the OL tag as I and add our varieties. And here, our menu is ready. So that's enough for now. So my friends, we've prepared a menu example with you and reinforced the HTML knowledge that we've learned thus far. And of course, we added plenty of lists, and we remembered how to add pictures. And we've made some differences in our menus with the basic tags that we learned. Now, if you wish, you can have a look and go back and remember what you've learned with small examples and progress more if you'd like. Otherwise, you can carry on with the next lesson. Now, remember, you can always contact us with problems or questions if you're experiencing something that you're just stuck with, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Hello, my friends. Welcome back. So in this section, we're going to talk about block level and inline elements in HTML. So first of all, I want to talk about block level inline element properties, and then we'll get into div and span tags that actually get their functionality from CSS. But basically, I want to tell you that HTML tags are examined in two different groups. These are block level elements and inline elements. So the element in HTML is either block level element or inline element. Cool. So now when we look at block level elements, they are always tags that start with a new line. It occupies the entire area determined between the opening and closing tag. When we look at the inline elements, it starts in the same line, and it only takes up as much content within that line. So here are two of the best examples that I think can make with these elements. Here are div and span tags. So come on, let's try to understand what we're talking about here, and we'll apply it in Atom. So start Atom and create a new HTML file, and we'll call it block level inline element. And start by pressing Tab typing HTML as we always do, and we'll give a title to our page. Now, without using the div and span tags, I want to talk to you about the HR tag, which I don't know if you've come across before, because I know I haven't shown it to you before. So in this lesson, I really do believe that we will understand the difference between block level and inline elements, right? That's a no-brainer. But I want to better explain the HR tag, because first of all, the HR tag is a single tag that does not need to be closed. So when you're using the HR tag, as we see here, it draws a horizontal line from start to finish. So now let's use a few HR tags in a row to better understand the block elements. So yes, we have horizontal lines under it. Right now, let's just slightly reduce the width of our lines with the width parameter. And that'll complete some points here and here. So I'll set the width to 400 pixels. And as we can see, none of the lines came side by side with all the lines lined up, because the HR tag is also a block level element. And when we use these elements, we have specified that it will always start with a new line. All right? So now, getting back to what I was telling you in the beginning of the lesson, we'll talk briefly about div and span tags so that we can see the difference between block level and inline elements. So first of all, I want to add 2 paragraphs, and I want to include our first paragraph in the div tags. Using the div tag here, let's think of it as if I've created a box. So let's delete a few HR tags just to see what that looks like and add some space between them. All right, so here we've created a box just like that with a div tag. And now let's just think that we've added everything between the opening and closing tags in this box. So we take a few words in our paragraph between the div tags and look at it, and there's the section that we take between the div starts with a new line. Now I want to see the difference by using the span tag in our other paragraph. And as we expected, there's no change in the part that we created with a span tag because, as you may remember when I told you in the beginning, the span tag is an inline element, and it starts in the same line, and it only takes up as much content. So that's about as simple as you can get with these div and span tags. We're going to be able to increase the effect, the styling part with CSS. So we'll be able to elaborate these tags in that part of this lesson. However, they are pretty good examples so that you can see the difference between block level and inline elements. So I hope that was useful. Go back and play around with it if you want to. And I want to see you in the next lesson. Hello, everybody. So in this section, we're going to talk about HTML tables. Now, a table is a structured set of data that's made up of rows and columns. HTML tables are often used to get a more organized image in your web browser. So the tables just make it easier for us to see the connection between different data. So we're going to add cells inside rows, as we see here when creating our tables. So first of all, we're going to create a table with you, and it's going to be empty. And then after that, we're going to fill our table with fruit and vegetables. Why not? It's good for you. And then you'll see all the different subtleties that we can employ while creating a table in HTML. And hopefully you'll see that it's pretty easy to do. So let's have a look at the tags and attributes that we're going to use in this lesson. So to create our table, we will start with the table tag and shape our table with other tags that we've seen here. Let's start using our tags with details and atom. We can continue by creating an HTML file called tables. As soon as Atom starts up, we'll press Tab by writing HTML and let HTML form the basic part. Now let's use table tag inside the body tag to create our table. And then here we can use the border attribute with a value of 1 to create a border. Now we can begin to create rows and cells in our table. So the tr tag is used to add rows to the table, and the td tag is used to define cells in the table. Let's go ahead and add a few lines and cells inside. A small table when we save it and run the application. Now, did you notice there was a problem in sizing since we did not fill our table yet? So, of course, we must first specify width and height as values in our table. And for this, we'll use the width and height attributes in the table tag. Now, here I want to give these properties, let's say, a value of 200 pixels. And we don't need to write the pixel in unit value here. So now our table is ready. So now let's talk about two more attributes before we fill in our table. The first one is the call span attribute, which allows the cells to merge side by side. Let's say I want to merge two of our cells in this first row. Let's copy our table and look at the changes. So in my first cell, I will set the call span attribute value to 2. And see, 2 cells merge, but one more cell appears here. So, of course, we got to remove this cell that we created earlier for this. Now our 2 cells are united side by side. Second attribute is row span, which allows the cells to merge one after another. And now we can specify the row span value to be 2 in the td tag to merge the 2 cells in a row and remove the cells that we don't want to have there. So now let's fill in our table like we talked about earlier. And again, we can copy our first table and make the changes to it. All right, so now I want to give our cells a title called Fruits and Vegetables. So to do this, we use the th tag. And let's add apple as fruit and eggplant as vegetable. Let's add orange and spinach to our second line. And now, of course, when we run the application, we can see our table in all of its glory. So now let's say that I want to delete the width and height values that we've given here and see how that's going to change. So if you remember, we had a little difficulty sizing our table when it was empty, but now it's not a problem once you start putting info into it. So we're not going to need to use the width and height attribute since we will use the inside of our table in full. So let's talk a little bit about the t-head and t-body tags as we come to the end of our lesson here. So we can use these tags to group table rows and to add a table header. And now we can put the parts that we wrote between the t-head and the t-body tags. Let's have a look at that. And we see no change. Why is that? But our codes are more organized, and they have been gathered in the table as related codes. So now when we remove the border in the table tag, we actually see a much more presentable image. And then finally, I just want to tell you about an attribute that you may want to use frequently. So while preparing content, we sometimes want to give users detailed information about a particular subject, and we don't want to include this detailed information in our text. So for those who want to get more detailed information about a subject or word, we can add a source link to words. And then it meets the detailed request of the users who want more, detail. So how are you going to do that? So HTML links are hyperlinks, right? Hyperlinks are defined with the A tag and href attribute. So the href attribute specifies the destination address of the link. And you can click on a link and jump into another document. Or when you move the mouse over link, the mouse arrow will turn into a little hand. For example, let's apply this for our vegetables and fruits. First of all, we determine the address of the page that we watch when we go to Chrome and press vegetables. And we add the link to the href attribute inside the A tag. Then we write the word to which this link will be assigned. Now, when this word is pressed, it will go to the address that we set. Now, let's do the same for fruits. So there you go, my friends. We talked about the structure of the table in HTML. So in our table, we learned how to create an order by adding cells to strs. In fact, we can always do more spectacular things visually with our table. But of course, remember what I said earlier. When developing for the web, you generally do the structural elements in HTML, and then CSS styling changes and JavaScript behaviors come later. So we talked to you about the structure of the table here, and we will learn many table formatting features in CSS. So in our next lesson, we're going to do a case study to examine the use of tables in more detail. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So I think you remember the last time we talked about tables and their structure in HTML. So in this lesson, I want to go over and reinforce some of that knowledge by preparing with you an example of how to use tables. So here's a hands-on exercise. So here we're going to prepare a table with flags, capitals, and populations of countries that we added in order to get information on Wikipedia when we click on the names of the countries. Now, if you wish, you can, of course, first prepare the table in the application and then follow after the rest of the lesson. It's up to you. Just follow along with me, though. I think you'll get it. And then you'll have an opportunity to check your table information. All right, so now it's time to open up Atom and prepare our sample. Now we can immediately create a new HTML file named tables example. And so now it's time to write HTML and press the tab button. And our HTML codes are ready in general. Now when we look at our example, we see that our table contains a header row and then 3 rows. So first off, we'll write the table tag to prepare our table and add tr tags to add 4 rows. Now it's time to add our cells into our rows. And since our first line is a header line, we can add our headers with the th tag here. And now we can start filling our second line. We'll add 4 cells in total with the td tag and add the England tag to our first cell using the img tag and src attribute. We downloaded the flag images to use before, so we can add the address of the flag to the src attribute. And in turn, we will fill our cells with the population of England and its capital. Now, remember that we use the A tag and href attribute to link the information? Right. So if you wish, when the user presses a country name, it'll go to the Wikipedia page of that country. So now, let's point to the Wikipedia page using the A tag for England. And yeah, there you go. We've added the necessary information for England. So here, let's figure out how to create a comment line when using Atom before entering information about United States. So while writing applications, we can use the comment line for our convenience and for those who will look into our code after it's published. So for example, in the table that we prepared, specify the code that we wrote for the part about England with this comment line. So for this, I define the line that I want to specify as a comment, and when I select the toggle comment option from the Edit tab, the comment line has already been created. And as you can see, when we press the slash with a control button, we create the comment line in the same way. Or we can write our own interpretation marks and define the part that we want to as a comment. Of course, it can be a little more difficult to write. That's why my preference here is to press slash and control. All right, so now we've completed that, we can now add the information about United States to our table. So we can add our flag to the first cell by specifying the address with the src attribute. And then we can add the country name and the href attribute and the Wikipedia link in the A tag. Next, capital and population information. And now we can do the same operations in our country on line 3. And as we see when we checked everything we showed, our example is prepared. So now we can use the T-head and T-body tags that we talked about. So we can take the header part between the T-head tags and the other parts that we write between the T-body tags. And when we save the changes and refresh our page, of course, there's no change in appearance, but we did gather the parts that we wrote so that our code is related as the table and grouped. So yes, indeed, friends, this is the end of this particular lesson. Now we've gone over and reinforced some of our learning with the example that we've created. And also in this lesson, we learned how to form the comment line in Atom. So stick around. I'll see you in the next lesson. Goodbye for now. Hi, everybody. So we have gained enough knowledge by now to prepare a basic HTML page, right? So that means it's now time to create a form in HTML. Form pages are the pages that we use to request data from users on, well, it can be on any topic, really. Now, we'll encounter these kind of structures, well, probably daily, right? For example, the fields that we enter in places like Facebook and mail, etc. Those are all form fields. So let's talk about the properties of form structures. So to create the form structure, we'll first open and close the form tag, and then we can write the tags that we want to between them. A form will take different types of input from the users, and this can be information such as username, phone, mail address, date, color, whatever. And then we can get a whole bunch of different type of information just by using the input tag with type attribute. So the input tag is a single use tag that is not closed. So let's better understand the form entries on the application in Atom. So when starting Atom, just create an HTML file like we always do and call it form practice. So press the tab by typing HTML behind it, and let's see that we have the main information required for HTML. So get the title form practice, insert our form tag into the body tag. Now, of course, you're wondering what the action and method attributes are, but I find it a little better to explain them in the following chapters rather than now, so stick around. So first, let's just examine the different types of input tags. We mentioned that there are different user information inputs like text and password, email, date, buttons, radios, and we have seen that we get these different data input fields by changing the type attribute. So we can save our changes and see what's happening on our HTML page. So now we can create a meaningful form page with this and other similar tags. We have identified some fields with the input tag for our form page, but it's not really clear what purpose these fields are they? Is it? So we need to give some meaning to this field. For example, we want it to be for a username and password fields on our form. So we can do this in two ways. First, go to the input tag and add a placeholder attribute to tell the user what this field is used for. And secondly, we can use the label tag to tell the user what purpose we want him to use it for. So how do we determine which label tag belongs to which input field? To do this, we've got two different ways. First, we'll add the input tag between the label tag to which it belongs. And let's make this the username. Now for the second input, we'll add the for attribute to the label tag and the ID attribute to the input tag. For example, let's declare that both are associated with a password field. In fact, when we look here, nothing changes from the user's point of view, but for the developer, it is important to specify which tag is associated with which field in order to avoid confusion. Now, as we approach this step for sending the data, we'll need to make sure that we receive information from the users in a complete and accurate format. So format control is already doing HTML for us according to the input type that we've added. For fields that we want to be completed, we'll just add the required attribute in the input tag. For example, suppose that we do not want the username to be empty. And for that, we'll just write the required property in this input tag. So let's save it and refresh our page. Now press the Submit button without entering a username, and see, as you can see, the system gave us a warning. Good, so now let's do the format test. We can use an email field for this. So each email address has an @ sign, right? So enter the mail address without putting the @ sign, and what happens when you press the Submit button? As you can see, the system gave us warning again, and it's not even about the @ sign, right? If that's the only criteria, because even if we just put the @ sign, what happens? We are still warned when the continuation is not similar to the email address. Now let's have a look at the radio buttons and checkboxes that we usually encounter on many forms. And we can have a look at their working logic. Now, as you may be able to predict, to be able to add a radio or a checkbox, All we have to do is just add the input tags with the attributes, which are radio button or checkbox. Checkboxes are often used to ask if a situation exists alone, where radio buttons are typically used to selectively choose between a couple of different options. Therefore, radio buttons are generally used in pairs. For example, suppose that this form is filled out by parents, and let's have the following question: are you a mother or a father? So we want the person filling out the form to choose one of these two options, right? But as you can see, both the mother and father radio buttons can be selected at the same time. Well, we're not going to want that to happen. So if we go step by step, we first add the tags to these radio buttons. And again, we'll connect them with each other as we did before. But we're still able to choose both at the same time. So to avoid this, we need to add the name attribute. So by adding the same value to the name attribute, we can tell the system that these two radio buttons are together. So let's save it and refresh our page, and we can see that we can now choose one of the two options. Cool. So now that we've learned how to use radio buttons, and radio buttons are generally used for a single selection. That leads us to checkboxes. So checkboxes, we can make single or multiple choices with checkboxes. Now to add our checkbox to our form, all we need to do is set the type attribute of our input tag to checkbox. Ask the parent, how many children do you have? We can ask our question and then create the options 1, 2, 3. And as we can see, when we save and refresh our application, the options have occurred. As we can see, it came up as 1 by default. And we did this using the checked property in the input tag. So we determine the name values of the check boxes under the same group in the same way. Select tag in our next selection tag and select tag, create drop-down list. And we can add list elements using the option tag inside the select tag. Make our previous example with the select tag and see what changes that we will now encounter. And what do you see? We have a drop-down list, and we can easily make our selection from this list. So finally, let's have a little chat about our text area tag. So it's actually a text field that we will frequently encounter, and it offers multiple lines of text. So we can, in other words, add more text into it. So let's add a text area and see how it works. So here we can talk about rows and calls attributes. With the values that we give to these attributes, we can determine the size of our text field. And now, to wrap up our lesson, let's just talk briefly about the action and method attributes. So we specify the URL address that we will send this information with the action method, and when we press the submit button. Now the information that we enter is sent to this address, so let's give the URL address of the Wikipedia page here. And as we can see, we are redirected to the Wikipedia page when we press the Submit button. Now we determine whether the information that we send with the method attribute will be sent with the get method or the post method. In fact, we have created a structure where we can get user information with HTML, and we can do the operations related to this information with JavaScript. But for now, this will be enough for HTML. We'll talk in much greater detail about CSS and JavaScript later. But in this lesson, we talked about the details of creating a form. And in our next lesson, we can create a form page that we will prepare and use everything that we've learned so far. So until then, goodbye, and see you in the next lesson. Hi, everybody. So as with all of our other topics, we're going to reinforce what we've learned by doing an example, this time as a form. So first, we're going to have to decide what is the purpose of our page. For example, I want to make a register page for a car magazine. All right, so let's say that I want this magazine page to send us out an email as soon as news about our favorite brand is released. So I'm going to want this page to have a design like this. So once you know the purpose, preparing it can be as fun as putting together puzzle pieces. So let's get started combining the pieces of our puzzle. So let's open up Atom. And of course, without having to say it right, we got to write HTML, press the Tab key to create the HTML structure. Now, first of all, we'll need to state that we want to make a form page. And for this, we can just add a form tag and then add everything that we're going to add to that. So now determine the title of our page. So then the header of our page is Car Magazine Register. So yeah, for now, the first part is to create the name, surname, and the fields are text types. So we'll just write input and press the Tab key. And we'll use the name and value fields here soon. And let's add a label here to tell users what data they need to enter into this field. We'll add the label tag for this. And then, as you know, we can add for and ID attributes to indicate which field this label belongs to. Add name, surname to them. Let's have a look at our page quickly. Not so bad, huh? So now we can add the placeholder attribute to be an example of how to fill this text field for our user. And we're going to want to write your name and surname into this field. So if we write George William here, it'll be better understood by the user. All right, so now it's time to create our second piece, which is the mail field. And as you can see here in our plan design, we have wanted to design the email field with just two boxes. So one of them will be for the mail address and the other one will be for the mail extension. So for our first field, we'll add a text type input field. We add the @ sign next to this field, and then we add the select field for mail types. So we are adding the three most common types of mail here for an example. You can, of course, increase this number if you want to. And let's have a look at our page again. And there you see that the added fields are there, but let's put the mail field down a row. Now you know that all we have to do is add a BR tag. And now we can write our label for this area and connect to our label again. Now let's ask our user to set a password. So for this, we will create a new password type field. Now create our other area, the gender selection area. So we have an input tag for this, but this time it is a radio button type. Now, since we want to add 3 pieces, we can copy and paste it 3 times, and then we can add our labels and connect. And if you want to delay further, filling in the name fields we left for later, we can start filling them. And then next, fill in the value field, and that'll let us know what value the user chooses. Now it's time to gather the date of birth of our user. So for this, we can add a new input tag of the data type and a label for it. So as you can see, once you get used to it, everything's quite easy. So I think that's pretty much the screen structure that we want, yeah? Now, we do have one last thing, which is the submit button. And it's enough for us for right now just to add an input tag of the type submit. So if that's as far as we want to go visually, we can now let's add what will be called an added function. For example, there are going to be areas that we're going to want to have as an absolute necessity, right? So for this, it's enough to write required in the tags. So let's see. Yeah, so do not allow registration without these fields being filled. Now, one thing we do need to do is to make the user enter a password in the character range that we want to specify. So to do this, we'll just use the pattern attribute. For example, if we want the user to set a password between 4 and 8 characters. All right, so now our form page, I think, is ready to save. As you know, we were determining which page of our form page to go with the action attribute. So send it to the Wikipedia homepage that we frequently use in our course. And naturally, we just did this just for an example for now. But don't worry, because we will see the details about this in our next courses. All right, so this is the end of this lesson. So just to recap, we've created a registration screen, and that completes this idea of how you set up a form in HTML. And you know what that means? That means that we have talked about everything that we needed to talk about in HTML. In other words, we've completed the first step of front-end development. So now you have all the information to prepare a basic web page in HTML. After that, it's time to finesse and add the visuals to our pages with CSS, and then to provide functionality with JavaScript. So, goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next lesson.